everyone to my first ever recipe video for Follow the Butterflies. I decided, since I was working on a food recipe for today that's going to go on my blog, that I would actually try and put together a video so that if you were interested in making this recipe at home to add more Harry Potter magic to your life, you could watch the video or you could read the post, whichever you prefer. So today we're going to be making deviled dragon eggs, and as you can see, we are starting out with normal chicken eggs. I've actually already hard boiled these, and we are going to make them look a little bit more magical before we eat them. So to begin, I've zoomed in. As you can see, I've got about a dozen eggs. I've already hard boiled them, and the other things that you need for this recipe is food coloring and Ziploc bags. So the first thing you need to do is take your eggs and crack them, but don't peel them. So as you can see, I am cracking the eggs, but not peeling them. So some pieces are falling off and that's okay, but for the most part, you want the shell to remain on the egg. Okay, so now that we have our eggs cracked but not peeled, we need to do the next step, which is to prepare the colors that we're going to dye each of these eggs. And I have used 6 different dragons in the Wizarding World, and I have researched what their eggs look like, and we're going to use the food coloring I mentioned to create different baggies of color and then stick the eggs in them so that we can dye them. So the first one that we're going to do is the common Welsh Green, and this is actually going to require 2 baggies because the majority of the egg is brown, but we want to add some green spots. So we've got to have brown in one bag and green in another. And so to make brown, we are just going to mix red and green. You don't need very much food coloring, just a few drops each. We're only doing 2 eggs of each color, so I'm doing 2 drops of each color. I don't think you need more than that. So once you have a bag of color ready, the next thing you want to do is add 1 tablespoon of water to the bag. You don't need more than that because, as you can see, that starts to fill the bottom of the bag. And I'm just going to seal it up while I make the rest. Make sure you seal it nice and tight so it doesn't leak all over your workspace. And then I will add a description of each color that I'm using for the rest of the dragons. I'm going to make them right now, but we're going to be making a Hebredean Black, a Chinese Fireball, Hungarian Horntail, Swedish Shortsnout, and Norwegian Ridgeback, of course. Okay, so the next thing you're going to do is take your eggs and put them in the bags. Here we go. I'm sealing them right in the bag, making sure it's nice and tight. And then I'm just shaking it around with that dye in there, touching all the eggs, trying to make sure I get it all over the egg shells. So I'm looking for any white spots. And then just moving the dye around. Make sure they're completely dyed. So when they're done, they should start to look like the color of the dye. Then we're going to set it aside. Here's our Chinese Fireball. You want to make sure when you're doing this that you are not squishing the eggs too much, not breaking the shells too much more than they're already broken. This is also a chance if you find a spot where you didn't break the shell well enough that you can fix that and just give it a little crack so that there's some cracks in the shell at that point. Now, once you have all your eggs in the bag sitting in the dye, you just need to wait 30 minutes. Okay, so now that we waited 30 minutes, it's time to move on to the next step of making our deviled dragon eggs. And the first thing is that I've gotten a lot more ingredients onto my workspace. I have my mayo and my mustard to make the inside of my deviled eggs. I have paper towels that I'm going to be using. I have a strainer because we need to rinse our eggs now. And then I have paprika. When we finish, I'll sprinkle that on top. So we're gonna just start by taking 2 eggs at a time and put them in the bag. And then I'm gonna leave them in the bag while I strain them and work them out of the bag. This is just to try and keep my hands a little bit cleaner and not get dye all over my workspace. Now, one thing you want to be careful of is when you're rinsing your eggs, go from darkest color to lightest color, just so that you don't get any transfer between your eggs while you're rinsing them. Okay, and now it's time for the fun part, where we get to peel some of the eggs and see how they've turned out. So you're gonna bring my strainer back, so I have something to put the eggs in. They're a little bit tougher to peel now that they've gotten some liquid into them, so it might take you a little while. Look at that. Isn't that cool? That definitely looks like a dragon egg. It's just, you know, peeling a dozen eggs very slowly. So here's a great example of how you can't tell from the outside what the inside's gonna look like. These are the same dye. This is the one that looks like this when you peel it. So it looks really pink, but it turns out being this cool spidery brown, which means it's a common Welsh green. Okay, so now that I have all of my eggs nicely peeled and they look awesome, it's time to make them deviled eggs. And generally what I do is just cut open my egg, scoop out the yolk, add equal parts of mayo and mustard, and swirl it all together, and then put it back into the egg and put some paprika on top. So I'm going to do that real quick, and then we will show you the final product.